last time we talked, you brought up Renovation of the Heart by Dallas Willard and quoted a passage from the Transforming the Soul chapter. And I want to start there and then say a couple things that I think about it. So I will be summarizing and reading from that same place. And he says, where life meaning is lacking, performance is at a premium. Performance, in quotations, in art or sports, for example, creates the illusion of meaning for a magical moment if the performance is successful. Performance presupposes an artificial context in which some portion of life is present as a whole, meaningful, unique, flowing, which is transcendent to ordinary existence. He says this may be in some area, such as sports and art, but it also, unfortunately, might be in the areas of religion or in the intimate relations of life. In these latter areas, performance is not really valued unless it deals effectively with life and reality as a whole and does not presuppose an artificial context. But of course, that's what he says performance does. Just a moment ago, he says performance presupposes an artificial context. And so then if performance does presuppose these artificial contexts in dealing with life and intimate relationships and reality, then performance is a sham. Here, performance really must mean competence and must eliminate illusion. Mere acting will not do. And then he goes into talking about fanaticism, where he says fanaticism in art, politics, sports, or religion, just to name some of the main kinds, is the result of inherently meaningless lives becoming obsessed with performance and then trying to take all of their existence into the fanaticism. And so I was listening to a conversation that Paul Vanderklay had with Paul Allen and a guy named Rod, I think. And they were talking about the idea of universal basic institutions, which is funny, play on universal basic income. And the idea that you can't really have universal basic income. It was from something that Paul Allen was working on. It just doesn't really work. And he's an economist, so he was like really working on why UBI doesn't work in the real world. And it's an interesting conversation. You can check it out on PVK's YouTube channel. And I'll probably link it in here. And so that was all well and good. But the thing that grasped me was this concept of institutions, whether or not you need them. And then I got to thinking about this Willard passage where he talks about how performance is present where life is meaningless, right? And so we live in a world where life is meaningless. Without meaning, people, John Vervaeke calls it the meaning crisis, although nobody calls it that anymore. But that's like that was the term they used for a while to just say like what's happening sort of to us in the world right now at in our moment in history. What is going on? Why aren't we like what it was before? And we've talked at length about like postmodernism and some other things that have contributed to the way that people sort of have like undermined the institutions and thrown out all the babies with all of the bathwaters. And we're just sort of, I feel like more people are comfortable in a place of like rejecting institutions outright, even down to like the institution of the nuclear family or just any family, marriage, these types of things are sort of lumped in with all institutions are oppressive. And so that is something that I lean towards, potentially because of the water that I swim in, but also because I just don't tend to trust institutions. I was looking up the quote earlier. It turns out it's not a real quote, but people attribute a quote to Paul Tillich that says all institutions are inherently demonic. And that's like a big win for me, like I'll write that one down and cross stitch it because it's like says what I want to hear. But he, I guess it's sort of like an interpretation of some of the things that he did say. Somebody summarized it into that beautiful phrase. And so that idea is kind of rattling around in my head. But back to just to lay out the three parts here. All institutions are inherently demonic. Dallas Willard says that where there is meaningless life, then there's the need for performance. And this fanaticism piece is really where I get the connection between institutions and what Willard's talking about. Like, the idea is that when you have a meaningless life, you can find meaning through fanaticism in any of these domains of performance. And of course, anything can be a domain of performance, whether it's literally anything. We're watching New Girl recently, and like one of the guys in the show likes to show off the girls that he has that he sleeps with, so it's like he'll like come into somebody else's room like ta-da, trying to just show off like that this girl was with him last night. That's disgusting behavior, obviously, but the point is it can be anything that you are fanatical about or performative about. And so then the third piece was the UBI idea that the church is the universal basic institution. And I don't know if I can wrap all three together right now. Maybe I'll tack on that last piece later in the conversation. But I basically had a thought earlier today, like maybe what happened is in our history, we took the institutions, because I have a grandfather who he was born in 1950, and he is, he's a big Trump supporter. And so he's like here for the reform of the institutions, but still fundamentally believes in the institution of the president of the United States. I don't believe that there is such a thing as the president of the United States. I don't think they're consequential. I don't think that that's really how the world works. So I kind of just like, I'm kind of just over it. Like, okay, fine, we can do all this stuff, but I don't think it really impacts reality. It's sort of like an artificial context, let's say. And so his generation, though, they believe in like the church, they believe in church governance, they believe in all of these mainline denominations that have churches with like 12 people in them, and on it goes. He still believes in the post office. It's like that kind of belief in the institutions. And so I'm not there, but unfortunately, some of that means that I don't believe in what we have today either, right? So I don't think like, oh yes, not having institutions is going to be the solution to all of our problems. So I'm like, I'm not fanatic about anything. And so I was recognizing this sort of like, okay, yeah, we've shifted from back then when he was a kid. There was football and people cared about it, or basketball or hockey or whatever. There weren't really TV shows. And so there weren't these like the modern day institutions are the Kardashians and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes and like these. I'm naming individuals, which is interesting, but like the NFL, these things are the institutions that people participate within, whether it's through gambling or fantasy football. If it's just watching the games, I like to wear Bills jerseys. I'm supporting the local team, and these institutions are like I'm a fan of the Kardashians. I'm not actually. Somebody's going to clip that. I'm a fan of the Buffalo Bills. Like that's fanaticism at its root, right? Like we use that word because it is what it is. And so the fanaticism that maybe we're disenfranchised from with the institutions, like the legitimate ones, the actual what used to be actual institutions like church denominations and government organizations. We no longer put our trust or energy or our meaningless lives into those things, but then we've sort of shifted on to sort of obviously meaningless things, and that might just be like um, a sort of tepid observation, but that's what I was thinking today. Is like it's fascinating that we've shifted from the way that old timers like to believe in sort of consequential institutions. I don't believe in those things, but I do like to spend my time and energy and emotions on Buffalo Bills football. And that's inherently meaningless, like obviously meaningless. And so it's almost like, to me, uh, I might be muddying the waters here using this like historical shift, but I just was seeing like, oh yeah, like the institutions were never the thing, right? The institutions are you only believe in them so insofar as they can sustain the thing, and the thing is the competence that Willard was talking about from the passage that I just read. So like you actually need to have a fittedness to the reality of the situation, and institutions are they're inherently demonic. They're always going to be behind the modern issues, always. But they will never be behind the perennial issues. And so it's kind of a fascinating problem of like institutions do a great job with the things that are always true, but they do a very poor job of the things that are currently manifesting as true, if that makes any sense. So that's a lot. It was rambly, but what do you got?
Um, well, when you're talking about institutions being inherently demonic, um, the thing about that is to make it more helpful. It says in James that wherever self-seeking is, that is demonic.
Yes, that might even be where
Um,
Tillich's pulling from, because I read something of his that was saying something exactly what you just said about the self-perpetuating impulse of an institution.
mhm. Yeah, and the self-seeking. And when we're talking about, I just looked up the etymology for fanaticism, and this is from the dictionary in 1895. Fanaticism is a half crazy substitution of fancies for reason. Uh, so when you substitute reason for your fancy,
Mhm.
that's fanaticism. Primarily in the field of religion, but secondarily in politics, etc. Fanaticism is demonstrative, being often ready to undertake, in obedience to its supposed duty, or called by special revelation, tasks that are commonly considered wicked or treated as criminal. That was an 1895 dictionary definition. Fanatic from the 1520s, insane person, from Latin fanaticus, mad, enthusiastic, inspired by a god, also furious, mad. Originally pertaining to a temple, from phantom, temple, shrine, consecrated place. Related to festus, which is festive, see feast. Meaning zealous person, person affected by enthusiasm, is from 1640s. As an adjective in English, 1530s, furious, meaning characterized by excessive enthusiasm, especially in religion. Um, and then a quote attributed to Winston Churchill is, "A fanatic is someone who can't change his mind and won't change the subject." That's one thought on fanaticism, just to flesh out as we're using this word. But I like that, the whole substituting reason for fancies, and then correlating that with self-seeking, um, self-seeking as a diagnosis of well, I mean, that's just a diagnosis of the human condition. And so when we're talking about institutions, it's mostly just a collection or an incorporation or a unifying mission, and people come around to institute something in order to bring that will about. And so, I mean, it's just really the human condition. So when you get the collective, um, it only exacerbates the issue, I think,
Yeah.
to some degree, because I mean, the thing is, you can guise it that it's not self-seeking because you're doing it for the community, for for the group, and so it's not utterly selfish.
Yeah.
Um, but the self-seeking, and then and then when you start to dream up of ways of trying to, because institutions just provide a service, so it's like, I think that's another undergirding principle. It's a method by which pressing needs can be met. When you talk about perennial means like plant, right? Like a root issue. Is that what you mean by perennial?
It means like
Uh,
every year, always.
oh, I knew it. But you're talking about perennial plants because they
Yeah.
bloom every
Yeah.
year. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, like I think it's an desire to meet needs. That's what any you see a need, and then we're gonna try to find a way to solve that need. Um, but then when the motivations, it's like when it's not according to sound reason or wisdom, but instead by the fancies of whoever is providing the service or is being served by the provider.
Mm.
Whenever they're self-seeking on either side of it, I think that's the thing too about like democracy, is that ideally the people who are being served by the provider have more say of how the provider does the thing than the provider dictating how the service is given.
Yeah. What this is actually so okay, so what I'm thinking is that the issue might just be that we can't like an institution cannot sacrifice itself. Otherwise it would cease to exist. So all of the hard work that goes into building this institution, but it can't sacrifice itself. And so then you
Mhm.
have people that try to hide themselves in the institution. "Oh, I can't be sacrificed because I'm part of this machine that is doing the
Mm.
good of a sacrifice without the sacrifice." And so the the system then substitutes for the actual competence of a real life sacrifice. I'm thinking of the institution of marriage. Both parties sacrifice themselves and become one. That's the way that it works. If either party refuses to sacrifice themselves, then it will be off kilter and it won't function properly. And so that's actually sort of, I mean, like I this I'm stuttering because it's very difficult to talk about like in absolute terms the efficacy of an institution. Of course, what you're saying is true. The plan to feed the widows in the New Testament in Acts, they're like, okay, yeah, we need to make up some rules. Like these widows count and these ones don't count, and these people are going to feed those widows, and that's going to be good. But then if we just like if that's what we did today, and we were like, well, are you a Hellenistic widow? Then we can't help you. Like, no, we abstract the principle of the gesture and we try to appropriate our capacity as a group of people, whichever group you find yourself within, to meet that need, like you're saying. So, like, Christians meet needs is the principle. And then what that means is you and I sacrifice ourselves and our money and our time and our energy to meet needs of other people, because we love them, because we value them, and we see the suffering that they're going through, and we want to share some of it or all of it as much as we can. But an institution can't do that. Like, so then your issue is that, like, even what you just brought up democracy at the end of your little thing there, and you were saying that it makes sense that the people would be being rendered a service by the leaders, and that's true, but it doesn't take very long for the leaders to figure out, hey, what if we just kept a little bit of, kept a little bit of power for ourselves? What if we insulated ourselves from the sacrifices necessary? And all of a sudden you have a different guiding principle for the same institutional machinery. So you've got the Constitution, but all of a sudden it's being interpreted in such a way that it's not the people that are benefiting from it, but it is the leaders that are benefiting. That's just one example of this. I think at an educational level, you can see this, like, well, the teachers are here every year, the students come and go. It's like, that isn't ever maybe explicitly said, but the shift is always towards the substantiation of the institution, so that it doesn't, you don't have to do any of the work to reinstitute,
Yeah. Well, and then even as we're talking about, this isn't a direct response of what you're saying, but this is just a thought that came to my mind. I'm saying, well, even as if I'm directly responding. I'm not directly responding to what you're saying. This is another thought that came to mind in terms of when you're talking about the feeding of the widows and all that. That's Paul giving that in Timothy. So this has obviously been going on for a while, this approach, but even at the grassroots in the book of Acts, when there's that, it's right after Pentecost, and then there's this huge movement happening in Jerusalem only. It's the church hasn't expanded yet, and it's not even. It's mostly just it is just Jews. It's just Judaistic, and also Greeks that have embraced Judaism that are believers. So the Gentiles aren't even in yet. But we see it says no one claimed to have ownership of their own. No one said this is mine or this is mine. They had everything in common, and then people were selling property in order to meet the needs of the poor. And there's this one outstanding example of Barnabas doing it, and everyone praised Barnabas. And then there's these people who then get in their minds like, oh, we can provide a service too, but we could just say that we gave all of the money from the proceeds, but really we got to keep back some, and then we can, look virtues from this, try to finesse the institution, serve ourselves through this
virtue signal.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, but then, God catches them red-handed through Peter, and God strikes them down dead. It's not even like Peter pronounced like death upon them. It's just like, for some reason, God did this thing. And so, in that, I just see, like, even in terms of to add that factor into God's sovereignty, and because I mean, you can imagine if that leaven creeped into the church even at that moment, right then, like, this is only a couple, I don't know, maybe a year. It doesn't give you an exact time, but it's in the first couple years, let's say, maybe even months of the movement. And if that leaven creeped in, and it's already starting to creep in, like right at the very beginning, like at its inception. And so, just to say, like, no matter what, there's going to be leaven creeping in, and we saw a radical thing in that moment, but I don't think that's obviously the exception to God isn't just striking people down dead when they lie about their charitable, deeds. But just to, I don't know, just to bring that dynamic into the conversation of, like, yeah, if it's man who's overseeing the thing, then there's no hope whatsoever. But thankfully, there is the mysterious sovereignty of God, and learn to be dependent, and to entrust ourselves to His leadership, and not trying to be the arbiter, not trying to be the guardian, the police to enforce the enforcer. I don't know.
Institutions are like, I want to say they're like, they're the best form of an institution would be like a recipe. So it's like, if you cook a carrot for this long, this is the texture that it's going to be, and so it'll be good for this dish. Or if you combine these various meats and cheeses, you'll have a delicious panini, let's say. And these things are extremely repeatable. Obviously, there's a certain amount of there's no agency, right, necessarily, for like a slice of bread, let's say. And so there's a smoothness to the process, the institution that is a recipe. But then when we try to abstract them to the realm of the relational, the intimate relations that Willard was talking about, or to reality, sort of like in all of its fullness and complexity, then it starts to be that institutions are not quite, they need to be more flexible than maybe we want them to be. And so one of the things that I was keying on in thinking about this topic was that we we want the we want the institution to be the ends, but the institution can only ever be partially the means, the memes to an end. But the institution itself inevitably looks more and more tempting the longer it is successful, you know? And so then uh as you institute the things that have been working, I think it's a common temptation to just say like, well, this is how it must always be, you know? And I don't know, like if you go back to sports for a second, two coaches in the NFL that had like 20 years of coaching for one team, they both just got fired because they're not that good anymore. And so that's like an example of they are institutionalized. Those individuals have instituted their ideas in football through their team, and for the last 10 years or so, both of them have been okay, some more successful than others, but like average at best. And so Mike Tomlin gets fired because not because he won a Super Bowl at one point, obviously, that was relevant then, and that's why he got to stay around for so many years, but he he walked away because he there's no success in what in his approach, right? And so there's other people that are incorporating new ideas, and they're still all participating within the broader institution of like, this is football, these are the rules, but like the attempt to play within those rules in a skillful way that each of these coaches was instituting was not good enough. And so those are the, you know, that's the artificial context of football coming into play, and they get relieved of their job. And so I guess I'm interested in this idea of like updating or renewing, reviving the institutions that we operate within. I'm more in this conversation anticipating that we'll talk about church, but I, you know, it extends to the other institutions. So like government and whatever else. But I'm just interested in the transition from a world where everybody just always trusted. I mean, I don't know about always, but they trusted, you know, whoever was in charge of the national committee of whatever, you know, Presbyterian thing. And yeah, I'm a Presbyterian, so that's what I think. Like they're much more comfortable with a creedal confessionalism like, because it was effective, you know, like it got the job done. Whatever the job is for like making people good or connecting with God, I think that there is some legitimacy to how those institutions did function in the beginning. And I just feel like that I mean, obviously, like we're living in a time when there's a category called the nuns, because they're just like done with just everything, you know. No, thank you. None of the options that you present me are attractive because of how much failure there's been at producing with any type of regularity uh healthy, fully functioning souls, you know?
I think I just want to bring a definition to what we're talking about. You know, we keep throwing institution. I
Oh
just,
yeah.
it helped me to, when I was, did you have a definition?
No, go for it.
Oh, okay. Uh, to trace the way the word's been used in English, it's the action of establishing or founding either a system of government, a religious order, etc. Um, from Old French, which was foundation, thing established. From Latin institutionum, a disposition, arrangement, instruction, or education. Noun of state from institutus, meaning established law or practice, is from 1550s, meaning establishment or organization for the promotion of some charity. is from 1707. And so, anyways, these are all the different ways. And now, jocular or colloquial use for anything that's been around a long time is from 1837. And that's normally how we use the word institution. But an established order or founding, and it's around a certain disposition or arrangement and of a certain instruction or education worldview. And I think this has everything to do with what we talked about in the last episode about dogma and law. Now we're talking about established orders founded upon, wisdom is made known by our children. I mean, if it's something that's truly of wisdom, it's and timeless truths as its foundation, then it's it's relevant at all times. Now, in terms of the application or the administration, in terms of administering the service, maybe that has room for tweaks here and there. But the principles that's founded upon, or the principles, or the certain education or mindset or principles, all these things, the law that's founded on, if those things are truly integral, then they're not going anywhere, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. But it's funny. We were talking about right before. I mean, I don't need to remind you, mostly for the listener. We're talking about before this episode. I've been growing in my understanding and toying with the thought about contentment and its relationship to satisfaction. And I was reading this book. It's called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment by Jeremiah Burroughs. Great book. But he was talking about this thought that the Christian is the most unsatisfied man in the world, though he can be content with the meanest of conditions. It's because there's a relationship there about, I'm only going to be satisfied once I have all of God. And he is my portion. And so I don't have full access to the portion that is my inheritance. I have not received the fullness of my adoption, which is the redemption of our bodies. I have not awoken in his likeness. That's what David said. I think it's in Psalm 17. When he says, you fill the wicked, as for the world, you fill the wicked with your treasures, and they're content with children and having their name known for generations. But as for me, I will not be satisfied until I awaken your likeness. And so just to add that dynamic to the conversation too, of like, there's always going to be an unsatisfactorily the world and the way that society is operating, and the mechanisms and the pulleys and the gears in which all that is going on is always going to be operating in a subpar manner until the fullness of the time. And so thankfully, I mean, we do have the assurance of a hope that's the hope of heaven, right? Like one day we'll live where all the things that are instituted, all the established orders and the organization and the way that all life is actually functioning and the way that we relate and all of it, it's going to be perfect. And in some ways, we are to be ambassadors of that perfect kingdom. And so therefore, as much as is within our ability, we are to be implementing those principles and contributing to the way that, seek the shalom of Babylon type of rhetoric while you're in exile, while you're in this time that's like away from the kingdom to come. You still seek the shalom. You seek the flourishing and the peace and the best. That's love. You love Babylon. You still love and contribute to the welfare and the well-being of where we're at now. And so just to add some type of realism, but at the same time, not as a cop-out, like add that flavor to the conversation that like, kind of like the poor you'll always have with you type of thing. Like there's things that are broken that there's nothing we could do about that. We can do our best to mitigate those. And I think that's what institutions try to do. They do their best to mitigate the suffering that comes from sin and all that. But it's like even it says in Jeremiah, it's a superficial treatment for a mortal wound. It's like we're plugging the hole in the ship to try to keep us afloat as long as possible, but inevitably the boat's going to go down if we don't anchor and actually get port and get healed. So I think that's the thing too. I think we're at that place where it's like we've been plugging this hole long enough, but this ship is going down. It's going to go down. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, look at what's going on with the Federal Reserve. Like, dude, I don't know how they're doing it still. They're keeping it afloat somehow artificially. Just this boat should have went down like 20 years ago, and it almost did in 2008. And then like, I don't know, just all the ways. It's just all this. It's just simulation to simulate like welfare. Anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But I mean, it's a prime example of that. Like, I feel like our institutions, all they are is just superficial treatments to mortal wounds, and but they're necessary. But it's prolonging the inevitable, I guess, in some sense.
Yeah, I can't remember what we called that episode, but I think we did talk about this sort of idea, like the way that there's a need to be focused on life as it is here and now, and trying to make it better. And so it's somewhat fruitless to live your life. I mean, like, yeah, entirely fruitless to live your life in such a way that is sort of so heavenly minded, no earthly good, that sort of thing. Like, that poor guy, whoever said that, he probably thought he was crushing it. He's like, I got one. I got a banger here. But like,
it's a Johnny Cash song, but I doubt it came from him
no,
first.
I heard. I want to say J.I. Packer, but it's not him. It's Vernon McGee. That's where I heard it first. But anyway, so there's like there's a need, like it pressing needs. This is something you've been talking about for a while. The immediate other person, that the hungry person that you're saying, be well, be warm and be fed, like, good luck, I'm going to heaven.
Yeah.
And you could too, even though you're hungry and cold. But like that I mean, that just has nothing to do with what Jesus, how he lived his life. He didn't just take care of people's physical needs, but he did do that. He healed the blind and sick and demon possessed. And it's like, he took care of people's present realities, and at an emotional level, at a spiritual level, a mental and physical level. And so there is that, obviously, participation with the other in the brokenness of the current state of things. But then there is also the wholeness, or the healed oneness that is to come. And all of that redemption and reconciliation in Christ is something that I think maybe we get that mixed up with the institution. You know what I'm saying? So like,
would you be able to say it again? I'm sorry.
Just the oneness that is in Christ, we get that mixed in with the institution. And so we say, well, there can be oneness if you only sign your name on the dotted line to all of these doctrines that we hold to be, somewhat self-evident after a few hundred years
Carry
of research.
This card.
Yeah, exactly. And so the confessionalism, or whatever, just identitarian theology, that you would participate in a certain fanatical realm of theology in order to participate in the unity in Christ, is something that is so, I mean, that's demonic, right? Like that is evil down to its core. But it is sort of a logical conclusion to the system, the practices that we lay out before ourselves. Well, it'd be a lot easier to get along with one another if we just settled the science or settled the theology here. Like, let's just make sure we all have the same facts, And I think that's not really how facts work. It's just so okay. So you were talking about an institution, and a definition for that. I also have just the first, the Google dictionary. It's coming from Oxford Languages, and it's the definition for institution. It says a society or organization founded for a religious, educational, social, or similar purpose. And so when you look at it, like just the inclusion of the word purpose there, you can break each one of those down to say like what, you know, an educational purpose. So that means you want to draw out of someone the capacity to be a certain way, uh, or a social purpose. Uh, you want to develop cohesion between or coherence between individual people into a group of people through this institution. There is a purpose and a design. And so then when it gets into religious institutions, I think that uh, you know the etymology for that, like something that is a religio, a religion, is something that binds together. And so at its core, it should be dealing with fundamental reality. But in practice, I think eventually these institutions sort of age out, they time out. This is something Peterson talked about forever with the like the evil uncle Set or something, and Osiris in Egyptian or Sumerian, whichever ancient mythology.
It's Egyptian, yeah.
He's talking about like how the king is the institution, right? That is he is the embodiment of all that has been developed through this culture. And so he sits on the top of the hierarchy and he is it. He's sort of unchanging and sort of ossified. He is the bones of this nation, but he's also rejuvenated by the prince symbolically. Like the next generation is supposed to be this embodiment of what the king was, but then also a furtherance of the fittedness. I'm not like an evolution person, so I don't use the word like uh, adaptation or adaptability or like it's the ability to be adapted to your environment in such a way that you survive, right? And so that is the piece that's missing, I feel like, from theological institutions that I see, like to whatever extent I see them.
Well, I mean, I think that even ties into, I think it is, but in the perverted sense of like trying to keep us alive any means necessary,
Like the institution.
rather than like, yeah, rather than like, greater love has no one than this and to lay down his life for his friends, like, maybe we got to close down the church. Like, I don't know why no one ever thinks
but
not to generalize. I'm sure people do.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong, but
within that, sorry, I just want to say like what are you adapting for is really important. That's why I'm bringing the word purpose into this, because institutions have purposes at given times. And so then when the purpose or the so I'm equating this
ultimately,
to,
if you're trying to meet a need, you're trying to serve it to where that's not need anymore.
yeah, the ends and the means get switched. That's what I said earlier. And I really think like if you operate within an institution and you think that the whole thing terminates on the institution, you must be a Baptist, then you're wrong. Like there's no other way to say that, because then you're in the realm of fanaticism and performance, which is completely maladaptive to the environment. The world is not a Baptist closed theological system, right? And there's nothing wrong with operating according to a closed theological system for generalities, like I like to wear these types of pants, and I like to wear, or I like to, sing these types of songs, and I like to not watch these types of movies. Great, fantastic. Nobody cares. But then when you start to say that all of reality is actually what this institution claims claims it to be, then you're stuck with a simulation, with a joke, right? And so as soon as you lose contain on your closed theological system, then all of a sudden you have all of this deconstructionism. And I've been claiming for years that deconstructionism is extremely necessary in the society that we have, because so many people have had constructed uh, upon them the wrong things. And I don't mean that every institution is wrong. I just mean that they are inherently wrong if you terminate on the institution rather than the purpose that extends beyond them.
Yeah, and which I have it pulled up. I was trying to find the concept. This is I forget what part of what you're saying earlier prompted this, but there's this concept. I don't know if this is the one. This is just what uh, Jim and I pretty much gave for me. I typed in what is the concept in political science that the person closest to the problem should be the one responsible for solving it. It says the concept you're referring to is often related to the idea of subsidiarity, which suggests that decisions should be made at the most local level possible, allowing those closest to a problem to take responsibility for addressing it. This principle emphasizes the importance of local knowledge and accountability in governance, and is connected to the concept of proximity and responsibility. Um, in political science, the idea that the person closest to the problem should take responsibility is often linked to the principle of proximity responsibility. This concept suggests that individuals or groups who are most directly affected by an issue or who have the most immediate ability to address it should be held accountable for finding solutions. Um, but just in a general sense, like I think there's another thing about it too. It's like if I feel like these are like luxurious problems to have, like the whole deep theological disputes about, predestination, blah, 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 blah. It's like this stems from an inactivity, like an idleness,
Mm.
because you're not actually, your attention is not, like you're not allowing your attention to be drawn by a pressing need. A pressing need that means it's demanding your attention, right? And you're kind of just ignoring practical, actual problems, and then it's almost like an ivory tower type of like, oh, we need something to gripe about or something, like, and I know it's there's a lot of nuance here. I'm not trying to like uh straw man this issue, theological disputes and all this, like these are weighty things, but at the same time, I remember Dave always say like all these kids like wanting to go into, orthodoxy and all this stuff is like, why don't you just pick up a broom or like make someone a sandwich? You wouldn't be so worried about uh all these theological like just it's just such a waste of energy and time and passion, and it's also so divisive and it's factious. It's it's self-seeking, honestly. At the same time too, it just tickles your pride and all these type of things. I think all this stems from like these are like first world problems in a sense, um whereas if and I think even as we're talking about it, it's like what we're talking about, what happened in the book of Acts there, like that was an organic, like here's a pressing need and people are meeting that need in their community. They see it. It's this local thing. And even with what Paul's saying, I think he's just giving wisdom of like, people are trying to come in and finesse our charity, finesse our kindness. And you need to have shrewdness. You need to have wisdom of like, that's not a pressing need. Like and he even says that to say, because he goes on to say, the ones who are not true widows, those who are young, or ones who, actually have kids, it's like their families need to learn how to take care of them, because those who do not take care of their families, they're worse than unbelievers. And so even Paul is teaching that in that too. It's like there's people who are way more close to that issue who can meet that pressing need, and they ought to learn how to do that. That's not really the church's or the community at large's responsibility. This is for people who have nobody and we are the ones who are the closest to meet that need. I think he's even kind of pulling on this proximity of responsibility thing. Like there's people who are more who are in closer relationship to the issue at hand, and them coming to us is because people are. It's the whole thing in Galatians 6. He says that we are to bear one another's burdens, thus fulfill the law of Christ, which is to love as he has loved us. But each person is to bear their own load so that they can actually not be dependent upon another. And so I think he's just addressing like who are genuine burdens and who are people who are just like people aren't bearing their own load, and so now we're gonna enable them by that's not love. That's actually um that's just well, it's just foolishness. And so love is not foolish. Love is very wise and sustainable. Well, you love unto death, but we have, through that is glory. And so, anyways, the eternal life. It's like I think it's pull on this principle. It's proximity of responsibility, proximity and responsibility. And it's like if we were actually active in like in our community and meeting pressing needs, like or even our own family and our own households, like uh, all these theological disputes and budgeting and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
We just miss it all. Like what's the purpose of the church? I think that's the question. Um,
One of another thing that I thought about with this is uh sort of in line with dominion. I think this is connected to your subsidiarity. It's sort of the divine deputization of humanity. Like God said, I want you to participate in this with me, to Adam. And so he gave him a job to do and gave him work to do, and Eve as well. And so there are these archetypal roles that we fulfill, each one of us in our own ways and in our own spheres of influence and whatever. And so it's like uh what you're talking about is sort of like the institution of the individual. We've been instituted
yeah.
as a person. And so what is a person? It is a creature in the image of God, like so there's this role that you have to fulfill, and you can do that well or you could do it poorly, and um you could live the least consequential life. Let's say like the widow and her 2 pennies in the offering box, like she puts those in, and that's actually, Jesus says, far more impactful in the world than the people giving 7% or whatever it is that they're committed to give, but they have this vast amount of wealth that they're bringing in on a daily, monthly basis, whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, that's what we're talking about. The fulfillment of your I want to say divinity, but like your full purpose as a human being is that's the purpose, right? That to the extent that an institution can help to draw that out of you. And I stopped typing to start talking, but the etymology of education, it comes from Latin roots, educare, to bring up and nourish, and educere, to lead out, right? And so
Mm.
that's a foreign concept to the way that we understand education. The Google definition is the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or university. Like that is the exact opposite of bringing forth the divine seed that is within each person. It is crushing
Wow.
that seed so it never comes out, and so that every idea that we have, which is correct, is built on top of this human being. And so that's something that I've been thinking
Wow.
about for a while. I've been fascinated with education because, like, what is it that we're trying to produce? What is the product of our education that we desire? And so, when it comes to Christian education or formation, that's typically the way that we talk about it. I think that it goes all the way back to the beginning, when the institution of a person is sort of that happens. God institutes Adam as his deputy in the garden, and that is sort of the issue that's at hand. Is like, okay, so we've got a bunch of mainline Protestants, we've got Catholics, we've got Orthodox, and I don't have any problems with any of those people, but like, what is the goal? Is it just to say that you're one of those? Is it just to say that you think the things that the people at the top of those organizations have told you to think? Like, I think that sounds
Is it to make more of those?
right. Precisely. And that's really what, it's proselytizing rather than or that's what evangelism becomes in that context, is just sort of recruitment. And then even I was thinking on this sort of thread that if you think about like what a church service is, I don't, maybe we could get into the definition since it's a grab your dictionary sort of episode. I think that like the term church service is kind of fundamentally flawed. I would imagine it's something to do with like Ephesians, right? So sort of the building up of the body or whatever. That's fine. I'm saying whatever. It's a scripture, right? So like there's value in it. But what does that mean? What are we building them up into? And then why do we have church services that are like predominantly public spaces where anybody can come and everybody should come, like bring your friends and let them be introduced to the gospel here. Like, okay, I thought this was for the building up of the saints. Like, can we get something straight here? Like, what are we actually trying to do? And I'm not throwing everybody under the bus by saying this. I know some people might think that's what I'm saying, but I really just want some clarity on what the goal is. Like, I think I have an idea of what my goal through Christian community is. And I would say it is to be built up into the image of Christ. I think that's where Paul takes it in Ephesians, like that we would be connected, rooted, and grounded in the surpassing love of Christ. All of those things, like that's what needs to be taking place, rather than being conformed into a sort of some sort set of doctrines that are downstream of the institution. Because I think at that point you recognize, the institution has become corrupted. Right? Even it could be perfectly good, it could be benign, but it is a form of corruption, sort of like a benign cyst, right? Like, that's not great, but at least it's not cancerous yet. As it continues, these types of things can become cancerous in the sense that they are not as they are meant to be. They're not productive or functional in the same way that they were intended to be. And so that's really what I'm getting at, is like, yeah, we need institutions, but like, for what? Towards what ends? And then maybe we could have a chance at saving them. You know what I mean? Like restoring them, reviving them.
Well, and then it introduces that tension of like individualism and collectivism. It's and trying to negotiate a healthy balance of that. But I don't think that's the thing. Is like, I think it's situational. Like, I don't know. It always comes down to this whole thing. Like, there's no system, there's no formula. And so you have to be in relationship with a living God.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to have the wisdom, and wisdom is not just like, wisdom is particular. It's not general.
Yeah.
Principles are general, but then wisdom is like how to meet this particular thing, and that takes wisdom. That takes, and there's Christ has become the wisdom of God. He has become our righteousness, our sanctification, and our redemption. And so, if it's not Christ, then yeah, it's not really wise. It's not really righteous. It's not in accordance to the purpose. That's sanctification, not in accordance to the purpose. And it's also not redeeming any of the. That's the thing too. Like, there's need for redemption. I think that's where we're touching that part of the conversation. Like, and the beauty to have a radical trust in God's redemption. Like, with the blights and all, and the benign cysts and all. Like, to have a radical trust in like God redeems it and He uses it. And so I think that's another thing I'd like to shoehorn into our considerations here, is also not only God's sovereignty, but His redemption, that He redeems all of our misguided misgivings and all of our inaccurate attempts to, and well-intentioned attempts to help and to alleviate and to care for, that when it's not in accordance to his wisdom, that he redeems it too. So that's the other thing I think that in terms of institutional talk, um, is like there's nothing beyond Jesus' ability to redeem and to bring back in accordance to his spirit and his purpose. I think that's a hopeful way,
I think it is
direction to
too.
go.
I want to say, like, I think that that's true for the reformer, or the spirit of the reformer, uh, that I'm sort of laying out on the table here. Like, I have nothing against the things that you hold sacred. Anyone that I'm participating in Christian life with. I just I want to make sure that we're not devoting our energies to things that are fruitless or unwise. And so then, yes, all of the things that are fruitless and unwise can be reconciled to Christ, but all of the things that are innovative and unwise can be equally well reconciled. It's sort of like
Yeah.
I want to be afforded the same, you know benefit of the reconciliation. Like, okay, yes, the institution can continue on this same path, and or it can remain inert here where it stands, and it could move forward, and both could be wrong, and both could be reconciled. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're in
Yeah.
the weaker believer territory. Like I can never tell if I'm the weaker believer or the other person is the weaker believer. Who has to give in Christianly?
Yeah. All of us. I mean, that's the gospel, right? We all are sinners, and to not just to compartmentalize that to like immoral deeds, but even just like, yeah, our self-seeking, our blindness, our certainty unto blindness, um, and um, and our lack of diligence and discipline, and our complacency, finding complacency in the wrong things. To be complacent,
Yes.
we're also. I don't think we brought that into the
No.
podcast. We were talking about the word complacency before this episode as well, and uh, that's a bad word in our culture. But complacency is the fact or state of being pleased with something or someone, especially oneself. But complacence is pleasure, gratification, especially self-satisfaction, delight in one's condition. And so I think that's the reason why it's a bad word in our culture, is because people can be complacent where they don't desire growth. They're like, I'm just content with being where I'm at, even though you're sitting in like a pigsty. But at the same time, there's a blessedness of being able to be in that book. Jeremiah Burroughs gives this definition for Christian contentment. Christian contentment is that sweet, inward, quiet, gracious. Oh, that's rough. Gracious frame of spirit, freely submitting to and taking complacency in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition. It's a very exact, and he breaks it all down. But the freely submitting to and taking complacency in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition, and even if it's Him who has disposed of us in such a way, even I was thinking about this a while ago. It's like, if Jesus is the head of His church, and the condition and all the quirky, all of it, the Orthodox, the Romanism, the Protestantism, the Lutheranism, the blah, 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 blah. It's like, in some regard, what if this is Him disposing of us in this way, His fatherly and wise disposal of us? and we're to be taking complacency, still seeking, he even speaks like still seeking lawful means of the alleviation of the affliction. But at the same time, as long as the affliction is enduring, I'm still have a gracious, sweet, kind frame of spirit and soul that is entrusting myself and truly complacent in his disposal. Like, this is where God wants us, and I see there's no other way, thy will be done. That type of abandoning outcomes to God. That was even what Willard was talking about in the whole thing too. And like, but the complacency thing, at the same time, I feel like there's many who aren't seeking the lawful, or maybe, I don't know. I hate, I feel like I've been generalizing a lot, and I hate it, but we're talking about a pretty big issue. And so, um, down to the particular, I feel like all of us, we are prone to trying to find complacency, trying to find a gratification and pleasure in our state of being on the external. It's even what we're talking with the Willard thing, right? Like, we all are kind of fanatics, and we replace reason with our fancy in some way, shape, or form. Are so prone, and even as soon as you think that you like, oh yeah, I finally have come to reason, like, you switch it again on some other fancy. It's like we're so prone to wander, and so deceitfully wicked in our hearts and our imaginations, that we find gratification and pleasure in the most corrupt places, even, and self-deceived places. And yeah, so finding complacency in the wrong things, in the institution rather than in Christ himself.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. And even like, to take it back to my idea of man, an individual being like the lowest level of institution. God institutes the role of man by the creation of man. Jesus is the second Adam that fulfills that, right? And so, like, this idea that you would find complacency in him is sort of, which is to say, to find satisfaction and pleasure in him, like, that is, it sort of follows, duh, right? And I think when you we this is just how we treat institutions, and it's the same thing that you were just saying, that we substitute reason for fancy, but really it was always the desire for our own creation, or our own efforts, our own performance, to take over that top role in the hierarchy. And so then you see that that doesn't work in the life of Jesus. He shows you the functional, methodology, which is uh, complete and total submission to the disposal of the fatherly disposal of God, and uh, of his own choosing. Right, there's a connection to his will, submitted to God. Right, he is not abdicating his will. He's not
Mm-hmm.
rejecting the power and authority that he has as a human being, not as God
Yeah.
necessarily. Uh, and so these are the types of things that I think that it's a spiritual bypassing that takes place when it's a spiritual institution. You say, "Oh yes, we've already dealt with all of these tricky issues, and so I just say what they already think about them. Like, I don't even think about them." We talked about Jordan Hall's thinking versus simulated thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
that concept is, you know inexhaustible in the context of institutions, right? And I think that across all institutions for all of history, you have the substitution of institutional thinking, or I would say simulated thinking, for actual thinking, and that's the direct purpose of an institute. That's the value an institution provides us. That's why we like it, because it does the good and functional aspect of simulated thinking for us. And so then, I guess the issue that I'm running into is, I feel like when an institution becomes corrupt, that is to say that it doesn't serve its function any longer. It 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 becomes time for, I would say, reform, uh, some form of revitalization that can only take place within the institution, or in something new. I don't know. Like in a tree can continue to grow until it stops being able to grow, but an acorn that the tree produces can grow a new tree. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. As we're talking about this, there's this story. It's in both Kings and Chronicles, but it's when Solomon dedicates the temple. Um, and he has a long prayer of dedication. Um, but he says, the part that made me think of this. I'll just take it from 32, even though it's out of context. He's just kind of just praying about the temple and asking God, when people utilize this temple the way that it's was made for, way it's being dedicated for, the purpose it was made for. Please honor that, God, and bless those people who utilize the temple appropriately, which is a house of prayer, by the way. Um, he says, verse 32, also concerning the foreigner who is not from your people Israel, when he comes from a far country for your great name's sake, and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm, when they come and pray toward this house, then hear from heaven, from your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you, in order that, for what purpose? In order that all the people of the earth may know your name and fear you as do your people Israel, that they may know that this house which I have built is called by your name. When your people go out to battle against their enemies by whatever way you shall send them, and they pray to you toward this city which you have chosen, and the house which I have built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. And this is what made me think of it. When they sin against you, for there's no man who does not sin, and you are angry with them and deliver them to an enemy, so that they take them away captive to a land far off or near. If they take thought in the land where they are taken captive, and repent and make supplication to you in the land of their captivity, saying, we have sinned, we have committed iniquity, and we have acted wickedly. If they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their captivity, where they have been taken captive, and pray toward their land, which you have given to their fathers, in the city which you have chosen, and toward the house which I have built for your name, then hear from heaven, from your dwelling place, their prayer and supplication, and maintain their cause and forgive your people who have sinned against you. But just that whole thing is like, and when people misuse this temple, right? Like, and the purpose that's dedicated for, like, and then they're punished for that. But then when they repent and they like recognize and they sanctify the temple appropriately, even that's the whole thing, like sanctifying God's name. He sanctified the Lord in his heart. That's another thing. You can sanctify God, which is like you actually allow him to serve the purpose that he serves. You appropriate his name even. And so anyways, to sanctify the temple, it was like to use it for the purpose it was made for. But there's inevitably, I mean, the temple got destroyed. I mean, we don't have a temple right now, right? So it's like, even that's a primary, a great example
Yeah.
of that.
I was just gonna say, I think like Jesus talked about, if you tear down this temple, I'll rebuild it in 3 days, and he was referring to himself. John puts that in parentheses. He's like, he was actually telling them that he was going to raise from the dead, and
Yeah.
then later Paul picks that up and says, "Oh yeah, don't you know? Like you are the temple. Your body is the temple." And then there's this weird like collective hive mind thing that happens when Christians get together and we become the temple. And so it's this beautiful
Mhm.
like subjectivity of the temple, like Christ dwelling in us. This can take place now, but then he can also dwell in the collective together. And so I don't think that it's different. You know, I don't think that when two or three are gathered, then he dwells in all three of you and takes up that much space. I think it's simultaneous, both and that he is dwelling in you. And so there is this institution of the temple that is man, where God dwells on earth in his creation with his creation. And there is the simultaneous communal version of this where we collectivize and participate in unity together with that crazy multiplicity that is human relationship. And so it is the reconciliation, it is the redemption of what you're saying. Like One of the things that always comes up when you talk about any type of church reform is like, or literally just like, I don't know if we're doing this right. It doesn't. You don't even have to say anything substantial. Just slight critiques bring up the phrase. It's a Bonhoeffer. Well, he talked about this too. There's no such thing as a perfect church, right? This is what people say. That is true. Absolutely. And that is not what I'm talking about. I am never saying that there will be an institution that is perfect. That would be fanaticism. That would be that fancy, like the we are going to get to the utopic vision of the church one day, and it will be because of my ideas. No, not at all. I'm saying that's impossible, except through actual unification through Christ, who is the structure of being itself and allows for any of this to be possible. I was trying to think of Bible verses that are like in reference to God giving us life, but like none came to mind. There's like some dumb worship song that's like, with your breath in our lungs, we pour out our hearts to you only. And
Yeah.
that the idea that I was getting is like gratitude has been something that I've been wrestling with, and I feel like it's similar to the complacency idea, like in the way that we've been using the word. I keep saying complacency, and my brain's like, that's not what that means. But the satisfaction. But it's more than that when it's gratitude. It's like the recognition of the gift that you've been given. Something has been given to me to be standing here with life in me. And it's like truly miraculous. Like that I'm alive, that's a miracle. I have a son, also a miracle. Father, miracle. And enemies, miracles. All of the people that exist, all of the life that there is. This is down to like lichen, or moss or whatever. These things are all miraculous examples of life. And this is the story that Genesis is trying to communicate. God gave life to all of these things, and that is a beautiful thing. There is death and corruption. And so, how does this all get redeemed? The picture in Genesis is relationship with man and God. And so, when you mentioned that the temple is supposed to be a house of prayer, I was like, geez, Louise, we 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 cannot even get that right. That is such a simple concept. Just relationship with God, dependent relationship with God. And I I mean, yeah. Like I'm biting back insulting things that I don't need to say. It that simple concept eludes us when we substitute the institution, because then all of a sudden, well, yes, this is a house of this kind of prayer, or this is a house of these sets of beliefs. And that's well and good as long as it contributes to the communion of God and man. And to the extent that it doesn't, then personally, I'm out. I don't want, like I don't know what that is about me. Maybe I just have some Martin Luther gene or something, but it's like, I don't want to do that because I think that it's detrimental to to my life, right? Because I think that I've found through personal experience that Christ is my life, and nothing else. And so I don't mean to say like, every institution that I don't participate with that many institutions. But every one that I participate with, I'm not saying, and I'll be watching, and as soon as you aren't perfect, then I'm not gonna waste my time here anymore. It's more like, why can't we just kind of kick the institution to the curb and take our personal templeness and our collective templeness and have that be sort of the grounds, the basis for this community, rather than the sort of mutual agreement on whatever, just substandard things. Like these are not the primary things. These are secondary things that we tend to want to elevate because they're smooth and they're repeatable and they're controlled, definite, finite.
Well, I think even, you know, just as treating a institution as simply just a macrocosm of the micro, which is the individual. Like all of us at our best are that, but then at our worst, we are not that. And I think, that's the same thing with a living church or something. It's like you have times where at their best, yeah, we are all actually uh, walking as he walked and being his hands and feet, actually loving, and then at our worst, we are being divisive and backbiting and horrible. But I mean, I think that's just the nature of the beast, which is our humanity. Um, but as for the other thing too that we're talking about, what you were talking about, the whole like, there's no perfect church, as if that's a cop out. I think that's a cop out. Like I was even talking with the kids the other day, like, just there's one side of like, it's good to have. I'm bringing a sympathetic part, like tone to the conversation now, but just because it's understandable doesn't mean it's justifiable. It's like, okay, I understand why you're doing that, but it doesn't mean you're right. And scripture calls us to be blameless. That's even the word for righteous, is like blameless.
But it's in the Bible, James. I have proof texts.
What? What?
No, I'm just saying like that.
That's true. So that's justifiable.
It's extremely justifiable. It's in the Bible.
Oh yeah. But yeah, the blamelessness, like, it says in Romans 12, like, there's a certain, I saw it in other passages too, but it's translated right in our language, but that word is like what is beautiful, what is commonly held in high regard and high esteem. Um, uh, Yeah. It's in bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. And even that word right is like what is handsome, what is beautiful, what is appealing. Which is an interesting thing. It's like, what is appealing to all men. It's like, but we're supposed to be called apart. But it's like, well, there's a common understanding of what is beautiful, and it's just, it speaks for itself. It's like,
I would say there's a common actuality to what is beautiful, right? The understanding is true too, but it's secondary. Like beauty is a thing. There is a norm, and then we see that. It is a intrinsic quality of existence.
Yeah. And so I think even this whole thing, respect what is right or what is beautiful in the sight of all men. It's like, it's something like decorum. Like there's like it's like the same thing. When you go out in public, you kind of operate in a way that's like, a little different than if you're at your home. Like the conversations or the words that are being spoken are a little different, like, because you're respecting what is commonly held in high esteem, what is conducive to just the well-being of others. It's decorum, and like it decorates society well enough. And so even Paul was saying here, I feel like that's the whole, he says it in the same breath of, do not be wise in your own estimation. Do not be haughty in mind, be of the same mind towards one another. Like this whole thing of like striving for unity, and there's a denial of self, denial of even self-expression. Oh boy!
Don't you dare!
Freedom of speech. You mean I have to deny my right to my freedom of speech? I could say wherever the hell I want. Well,
not in church.
Not if you. Well, not if you want to actually love people. It's like there is it's just the reality of and it's just godliness. Like it's so, I don't know. Anyways, I forgot how I got there from the blamelessness to be blameless, but I think it's because of what's right, and just thinking about. I just been really trying to flesh out these thoughts of what's right, what is what is righteous. You know, that word's also blameless, and to not let the blame be laid on you if there's a rift. If you, as long as it's up to you, I think it says in right after that. Uh, yes, literally the next verse. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. All men. That's if possible. So far as it depends on you, that's blamelessness. And so, even with the whole, oh, I understand, but if there's blame, if the blame is laid at your feet, like that's part of repentance. Like, I own that. I play a role in the lack of unity. And that's the whole thing. I love that you said that about the actuality of beauty. It's like, you know, I think it says in the psalm, how beautiful is it for brethren to dwell in unity? Like, and what makes for peace? It's situational, because there's so many different ways relationships can be strained and broken. And so, uh, to be peacemakers, right? To be merciful as your Father in heaven is mercy. It demands mercy, but also demands a radical selflessness. Um, and all these things are impossible without Christ Himself. If it is not Christ, because Christ has become wisdom, He has become righteousness. Righteousness is the opposite of the unrighteousness, which is, yeah, to blamelessness. It's like I can actually operate in a way where it's like I'm not at fault. Uh, I'm not to blame when things blow up. It's not my fault genuinely. That's godliness. To discipline yourself for the sake of godliness, like to operate in a way that is actually healthy and beautiful. And I love that you talked about with education. And then that's the Great Commission. Go and educate. Try to lead them unto the one who can draw that out, but also because He has deposited in you a new nature, deposited in you, you know, by the grace of God, you are a new creation, and then He draws that out of the new self. Um, and so far as He, you know, does that with me, and I'm in a relationship with other people who are also, that's happening with them. We also draw it out of each other, and Christ gets the glory for it all. But um, and so yeah, I think in that's just community. I think rather than trying to go the institutional route, it's like the communal route. Um, I don't know. Now I'm trailing off, but
No,
I'm
I'm
sure
with
there's
you.
stuff you
I'm
can
with you.
work with
This
there.
is something I brought it up to you before, but it's something I've heard Jordan Hall say. Um, and community and society are often used interchangeably, but he likes to delineate them and add the third, which is communion. And it's sort of like uh, communion is the ideal and maybe the beautiful thing in this triumvirate, and you've got community, which is like a second order, maybe more public and less intimate form of this. But communion is only possible with, I mean, I think he says Jesus, but it's like, yeah, like an intimate relationship with Jesus. And then community is sort of like the maybe the secular possibility for that. And then society is even worse. It's just sort of the imitation of these things that's sort of externally compressed people that are united by some thing that is too weak. It doesn't have the necessary attractive power to draw everyone to actual unity, because that's the issue. That always has been the issue. And it even is the issue in like Genesis 3 is that we are not God, right? And so we must then trust God in order to participate in life with Him. And so, as soon as we don't trust Him, then there becomes the multiplicity. And so, I think,
Mm.
I think that society is just, you know, just puts something else at the center, uh, and maybe community puts humanity at the center, or something like that, and then communion puts God at the center. And so obviously God has the most attractional power there, as far as like magnetism or something. But beyond that, the real, true, amazing thing that is afforded to us in communion with Jesus is the oneness. So there's an actual transformation of the what do you call it? The multiplicity into the single, the unity. And so that is the difference. And I think it's sort of pointless to talk about institutions at that point, in my opinion, because I think that they're, they the institution will never be Christ. This is sort of like the map and the territory. Like the institution can only ever be a map, and that's not to say that it's a bad thing. It's very helpful as far as it can help you understand Christ and what where he is and where he isn't to some extent. But you'll never have a grasp on the territory if you're holding the map. That's the nature of a map. It could never be the territory, and so the issue then becomes the prioritization, or even the claim, I guess, that your institution is Christ. And I think that that's something that maybe that's implicit in all institutions, and that would be the demonic thing that Paul Tillich is trying to claim there. Like there is some eventual termination on the institution itself that is not Christ, and so then it utterly fails, which is why you must continually revitalize these things in order to participate with Christ in community or communion. And so anyway, I was also thinking of maybe it was I think our last conversation. I tried to say some weird vision that I had. It's like Christ is the structure of being itself, and so nothing can be without him. And insofar as he is the structure of being, then all things can be united in him. I'm just not going to explain that, but that makes sense to me. And then with that, he has created multiplicity, and this was his choice. He did this. So we are all running around attempting to be our own little institutions that he has instituted, and that never works. And we can come up with many different forms of society that function for a while and then collapse. And if you know anything about history, that's the whole thing: is things pop up and then they go away. And so the beautiful claim, and prophecy of Christ is that he will come again and his kingdom will be established forever. And so this thing is like that's what that is to me, is the unity, and it is comprised of multiplicity, which is the benevolence of God, to not steamroll and to not, against anyone's will, conform them to his image, but rather transform them. That's how everybody says that verse. It's like you don't need to be conformed to the world. That's fading away. That will lose its attraction, and you will fail to adhere to one another. And then on the other hand, you don't need to be conformed to Christ per se. I mean, I'm just using words wrong here. You can, of course, be conformed to Christ. There's other verses that talk about that. But the transformation is really what I'm getting at here. That we would be transformed is the new man that you were referring to. That is what is possible through the templeness of our lives. Like, to the extent that we welcome God into us, this is the abiding, and take up residence in him, then we afford ourselves this possibility for unity that I think that I just said it a second ago about like the demonic nature of institutions is that they claim that this is what will happen through their methodology or through their systems. And I just want to make sure that we're distinguishing, no, that only happens through Christ. And so that's really like, I'll be fine if we could just get to that part of the conversation. Let's just agree that this happens through Christ, and then we can fight about all the other stuff. That's all society level nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, because even when we're talking about the institutions, like established order of government or religion, um, Jesus, he said, while they're debating upon who was the best amongst them, the disciples were debating who is the best, and then Jesus, he says that the Gentiles, they lord it over you. Whenever the Gentiles or people of the world get power, they become masters. But you will become a servant of all, and the greatest of you will be like the youngest, uh, and the greatest will be like the least, and will be a servant of all. And so that whole thing of like, I feel like when the institution, or especially when the church loses sight of what true godliness really is, which is servanthood, what true ministry is. Ministry is just service, servanthood, um, and also to be a tool fit for the master's use. Um, a tool that's fit for the master's use is one who knows who the master is, and in turn learns from him who he is, which is he's a tool fit. That's what makes him fit for his use, is the acknowledgement of, I was set apart for this purpose, to be a tool. What type of tool? That's the multiplicity. That's the individual, uh, um, and then I'm actually employed, occupied. I am useful. I'm full of use. I'm actually used and applied to a certain use. I'm not useless. I'm not lacking use, or I'm losing sight of what purpose I'm to be used by Him to serve. Um, that's when beautiful things take place, and then especially when we're recognizing, like, um, yeah, if the Lord's not in it, the builder builds in vain, right? So
Mm.
I think any good congregation, any good church body understands that. Any good pastor knows that, and any good people who are put on leadership know that. But sadly, I think there's a lot of churches that don't know that. There's a lot of Christians that don't know. Uh, well, I mean, that's even when we're talking about, you brought up earlier that Ephesians, it all comes down to that. Ephesians chapter 4. Um, that we each have our own gifts, and he gave some to be pastors and apostles and evangelists and blah blah blah. For what purpose? For the equipping of the saints for the work of service. I mean, that's pretty good one. What are these gifts here? So that other people could be equipped, so that they can also be serving. And I think that's the other thing. Like, people have lost sight of what the Christian life is about. It's about being a servant, that you are occupied and you are actually partaking in service. You're actually doing something. You're living out a purpose, and you are actually employed. You're occupied. And when people are not occupied in the service that they were consecrated by the blood of Christ to, that's what consecration means, by the blood of the covenant, when it's sprinkled on you, what was normally used for common use, a table or like a grill, like the altar was just pretty much like a grill. When the blood was sprinkled on it, and it now became the altar of burnt offerings. It was the most holy thing. But before that, it was just a table, as well as with the grill on it. And so, when the blood of Jesus sprinkled on you, you and your multiplicity were now consecrated to serve a purpose and be employed and occupied. And that's the whole thing. Be occupied until I come. That's what Jesus said. Um, and so we have so many. I've been thinking about this a lot, because I've been in First or Second Peter chapter 1, and he's talking about that, like applying all diligence, add to your faith. He has a whole list, and he says anyone who has these qualities and are increasing on them, they will never be useless, or they'll be fruitful, abounding in fruitfulness, or unfruitful. They'll never be unfruitful or useless. And I was just thinking about that, like how many Christians in America are on like spiritual welfare. It's like they're spiritually unemployed and using the church as like a welfare system, of like using God's grace as a welfare system, and they're just not. They're just reaping the benefits of Christ without actually being employed in service. Like, and so it's just, and then when you get to I think just we as America have a welfare problem, right? Like, we're just lazy gluttons. So,
Hey,
and then especially Yeah, that's right. I said it. I'm not ashamed about it. I have it in me too. I'm freaking gluttonous beyond compare, and just like I don't want to do stuff. Are you kidding me? Uh, but then when you like, we could be like the most productive. There's many, a lot of people who work, but then spiritually they're just like, the critique, the conservative thing, like, oh, all these welfare socialist programs, blah blah blah. It's like you're doing the same thing spiritually with Jesus. You're just on this welfare program and just getting what you can get and just coasting, living deposit after deposit of God's mercy and grace while you're not actually contributing to the furtherment of his kingdom. Or I don't know a better way to verb. I don't really like using that verbiage, furthering, as if you're just not employed. You're unemployed. So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's the first purpose, right? For the equipping of the saints for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. And as a result of this service, we are no longer to be children tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness and deceitful scheming, which is that institutional thing, right? But speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies. That's a crazy thing. So the whole body is fit and held together by what every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, which causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. So the proper working of each individual part causes the growth of the body, not the proper working of the institution. And then, the congregation is built up because the institutions, no, each individual person in the faith, we all have a ministry. Ministry is just service. And so we all have some type of employment. And, anyways, I think a lot of this just comes from idleness, right? Like just, idle hands do the devil's work. And people are just like, my Christian life means I just consume and I just live in this blessed state and I'm constantly just worshiping God. Thank you for all you given me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's not worship. A true and proper form of worship is to offer yourself a living sacrifice, to offer yourself, to give yourself back to Him.
Yeah, and it's occurring to me in this context too that like God gave Adam something to do. He had something for Adam. That's a purpose for Adam, and I think maybe the purpose, like, something else that occurred to me thinking about purpose is like, some people don't like art, and that's fine. It's probably not their purpose, but the role that an artist plays is purposeful within this, unity out of multiplicity. And so there is room for the human being fully alive, living in the terms we've been using tonight, complacently in this unity, that they would be full of pleasure, living out the life that they're intended to live. That could mean, whatever. It could be a philosopher or an astronomer or, just a regular old concrete mason. Like these people fulfill that normativity of the beauty of their life, and that is their role. And that was always Adam's role, is to bear the image of God, to be an icon to God. And I think that's why this is such a broad and massive, complex issue, is because it really comes down to humanity, the infinite God, and sin. So, just a simple little issue to tackle here, but like that this is why the structure of the story is Adam, who is also an archetype for all of us, fell and lives disconnected from God. And the whole story is, how do we get back to God? It's like, well, we actually don't. God is continually getting back to us. And drawing us back to himself. And so he does both parts of that, and
Mm-hmm.
exceedingly well. He accomplishes his goal, and then and then what? Right? That's kind of the place that we're at now. And so when it gets to the institutions, the purposes that they're aimed at, I think that now is a transitional period in church history from like what we have been doing to whatever we will be doing, and I'm sure it will be more institutional stuff. Uh, and the through line, I think, through all of church history, even like when they institute Matthias as the 12th disciple, and then God's like, that's nice. And he runs into Paul or Saul on the road to Damascus, and he's like, actually, you're the 12th disciple, but don't tell them. And it's like, that's just the way that he's going to work through all of this. He'll do what he needs to do, but he'll also let us do whatever we want to do. It's not like Matthias didn't get struck dead for getting nominated, right? That just happened, and then nothing else happened from him, at least not in the Bible. And that's just sort of like, I guess the piece that you're trying to offer me through this conversation is like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And we don't have to get it right necessarily. But I think I would like to shift focus, like let's focus on Christ. And I don't mean like, like there's 75 different denominations, probably more, that all have his name in the title. But that doesn't mean that in actual lived practice, there's any more focus on him on a minute to minute basis. And that's really where I think it's needed, because that's really where God can be represented. That what you read from Solomon and the temple dedication prayer, I've read that before too. And it's, not to brag. And it's it's a really it's a really perfect example for this, because it's all of David's hard work to build this temple, and it never happened. And then Solomon does do it. He finally institutes the thing that God has said that he would do through this line, and then it all comes down to the people participating within the institution. And so Solomon is fully aware of this and wisely asks God for, sort of cooperation, like, hey, we're going to get this wrong, and hey, we're not going to do this right. But could you please continue to draw us to yourself, because that is where your name will be known, is through the individual examples of your character in relationship with us. And that's really, that's really the gospel. That's the Christian story. It's everything that a Christian person has to offer, is like, yeah, none of this good stuff in my life has to do with me. It really is just God. And I actually believe that he's the structure of reality itself. And so that means a lot.
Yeah. And then just to clarify, even the Christian life, when I'm saying the whole, it's not just thank you constantly. It is the soul responding in gratitude. That's all of our, without gratitude, uh, it's the only way we can offer proper service is through gratitude. But it's not just saying thank you. It's,
Yeah.
I am expressing my gratitude through actually, doing what you say. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say?
Yeah.
Right. And it's also a dedication. I'm going to dedicate myself, because he's given me the ability to do that. Before, when I'm dead in my sin, I don't have the ability. I can't, because dedication, it literally means the action of consecrating to a deity or for sacred use. That's what dedication means. And so it is I'm going to consecrate myself. I'm going to dedicate myself. I'm going to sanctify myself, in the sense of he's given me self-control, and I'm not going to do with that. I'm going to dedicate myself to this sacred employment that he has commissioned me. He has commissioned me and put me into commission, and I wander from that often. But he's given me the ability to rededicate myself. I have self-control. He's granted me liberty, and even with that too, in all that I do, all that I try to build, I dedicate it to him. I do it unto his glory. I dedicate this to Jesus. My life, let my whole life be that. I dedicate this to Christ, who has saved me, died for me, rose again, and who is my blessed hope, who is the love of my soul. Um, I want to dedicate everything to him. At my best, there's times where I don't. I want to dedicate to my own well being. I dedicate this sacrifice to my future welfare or to the welfare of my children. Like, thankfully, God has that in mind when I dedicate to him. Like, you know, we kind of talked about that before the thing. Like, thankfully, he's the type of God that is all loving and he has that in mind. And I could just dedicate straight to him and he's got it all sorted out. Like,
Yeah.
he has my best in mind, genuinely. But at my worst, I don't really trust that. And I think I have my best in mind.
Yeah.
And I dedicate it to myself. And I find complacency in that until I don't. Everything's blowing up. And I'm like, this is painful. And he's also scourging me because he's a good father, saving me again, wrecking all of my plans, tearing down my temples, turning over my tables, cracking the whip, telling me this house is a house of prayer, but you're turned into a den of thieves. And I'm rejecting the chief cornerstone whenever I try to erect something that's not dedicated to his name and for his glory and by his spirit, by his leading, by his commissioning. I reject the chief cornerstone constantly.
You made me think a lot of things that I've already said, so I think that's a good place to end. I don't need to reiterate anything. And I feel like it's almost midnight here, and my lazy eye comes out when I get tired. So, for purposes,
you turn like Steve Buscemi.
Yeah,
He's talking to a squirrel over there.
Yeah. So, without further ado, thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I love you.
Love you too.